Now, anybody that's ever seen any kind of movie knows Frankenstein. You know, there's Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, House of Frankenstein, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, The Curse of Frankenstein, The Evil of Frankenstein, Frankenstein's Island, Frankenstein. So we all know who Frankenstein is, yes. I know the monster itself, his name isn't Frankenstein, it's the name of the scientist that created him. Whatever. Since you know so much about Frankenstein, have you heard about that time that he conquered the world? This is Frankenstein Conquers the World. Frankenstein Conquers the World. It's a movie from 1965. It's an American-Japanese co-production featuring giant Frankenstein. Kaiju Frankenstein, if you will. You know, in terms of a Frankenstein movie, is pretty weird. And even in terms of a Japanese giant monster movie, it's pretty weird. So the concept is this. During World War II, the Nazis had found the still beating heart of Frankenstein somewhere. It's being kept alive for hundreds of years, I guess. And so they do experiments on it to keep it alive and all this. And being allies with Japan during World War II, they ship it over to Japan, where they can conduct further experiments. So the beating heart of Frankenstein ends up in Hiroshima. And I think we all know what happened in Hiroshima at the end of World War II. So it was assumed that the heart of Frankenstein was destroyed in the nuclear blast. But no. 15 years later, the city has been rebuilt and things are starting to get back to normal life. Suddenly they find a feral boy running around in the streets of Hiroshima. They can't figure out where he came from. He's kind of deformed looking. I mean, he's got that weird flat top thing going on his head, and he's got really bad teeth. So they take him in and they want to study him, and they figure out that he actually is grown from the beating heart of Frankenstein that had been irradiated. And as a matter of fact, he's still growing, and he's growing bigger every day. So yeah, there's a couple of scientists that want to study him, of course. One of those scientists is played by none other than Nick Adams, who was also in another Japanese-American co-production, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, which is about Godzilla going into space along with Rodan and fighting King Ghidorah on a Planet X. And I reviewed that on my channel quite some time ago. But anyway, there's a similar feel here. Like, basically Nick Adams spoke all of his lines in English, and all the other actors, of course, spoke Japanese, and they were dubbed over in the American cut. He and the other scientists have decided that, yes, this is Frankenstein's monster. We want to study him. We don't want to terminate him or anything like that, but he's getting so big that he's getting out of control. And he actually, of course, breaks out and escapes into the miniature landscape. So they have to find him. He's out there eating cows and stuff. I don't know, living in a cave, but he's now grown to giant proportions, like 100 feet tall. Then he runs afoul of another giant monster, which just happens to show up in this movie, and that's Baragon. Baragon is I guess, sort of reptilian monster. He's got a giant horn on the front of his nose and breathes fire. He's got floppy ears and puppy dog eyes. I mean, that's the gist of the movie. Is Frankenstein grows from a heart to giant proportions, somehow manages to make himself some clothes, and then fights Baragon. Snaps his neck, and then he gets killed in an avalanche or a landslide or something like that in the forest fire. Like a lot of TOHO Kaiju movies, there's a good bit of the human drama sort of thing going on, right? Doctors in the lab theorizing about how this monster came about and what they do to stop it, and The boring stuff. The stuff that I used to fast forward through all the time when I was watching these movies. It lost my attention a couple times in this movie because some of those parts are really boring. But overall, it's pretty much like every other Toho 60s monster movie. But not very much like the old Frankenstein movies. This was the first time I'd ever seen this movie. I don't know why, I just never caught it on like late night TV or anything like that, and never saw it on VHS or DVDs or anything like that until I finally ordered it from Amazon and watched it. I didn't like it as much as, say, like a Godzilla movie, because the Godzilla character I can get behind, and it's always like, he might look different from movie to movie, but I don't know, he's more monstrous looking. This is just a guy in a loincloth with a flat head and bad teeth. And it makes for a pretty weird fight with Baragon, where one's like breathing fire on him, and all this guy's doing is just punching him and throwing him over his shoulder and drop kicking him and stuff. But it's still, like I said, it's still a good fight. I mean, the effects are, other than the lack of costume for Frankenstein, Baragon looks fine, or as good as the 60s can get you. Your miniature buildings all look pretty cool, and miniature landscapes, little tanks and things like that. That's all fine. It's all what you would expect from a kaiju movie. Frankenstein Conquers the World is the American title of this movie. In Japan, it was released as Frankenstein vs. Baragon, which I think is a little more fitting, because that's basically what it is. He doesn't conquer the world. He escapes from a lab and he conquers maybe a few hectares of Japanese landscape around Hiroshima. Eats all the cows and stuff, but that's the only conquering that he does. So they changed the title for the American release. Also, there was apparently like an alternate version of this where Frankenstein fights an octopus in the mountains. Giant octopus. No water anywhere. But they cut it out of the movie because they were like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, why'd you shoot it then? But yeah, there's footage out there of Frankenstein fighting a giant octopus. I guess very similar to like King Kong versus Godzilla, where he fights the giant octopus. I wonder if it was a real one like in there. And since I have this on DVD, there are like special features on there. There's deleted scenes, so I'm thinking the octopus scene is probably on there. I haven't watched the special features yet, and I did just watch the American dubbed version. I don't know, overall, I guess, when it comes to Toho Kaiju movies, this is about in the middle. It's better than some of the crappier Godzilla movies, like Godzilla's Revenge. And I actually think I liked it a little bit more than even, say, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. Just because there's more monster action in this than there was in that one. That one was all about aliens and Nick Adams hooking up with a hot alien lady. Oh, and coincidentally, he actually hooks up with the same actress playing his assistant in this movie. And I think it was rumored that he had an affair with her or something while they were shooting these movies in Japan. And yeah, I could see it. You could kind of see it on screen. But that's neither here nor there, because who cares? This is about Frankenstein. This is not about Nick Adams. It was a bit of a chore to get through this one. Not like it was boring, but it was just like there was a lot of yammering in there. Didn't really make a lot of sense scientifically, but I'm used to that from these movies. But for some reason I just felt myself kind of just my attention was kind of wavering a little bit until we get to see Frankenstein actually fight Baragon at the end. It's a good battle, it's a good kaiju movie. It just took a while to get to the point, and watching this like feral cave boy with horrible teeth growing up in a lab was just boring, but it made up for it in the end. So I think overall I'm going to give Frankenstein Conquers the World, aka Frankenstein vs. Baragon, a B-. B-. It was still good. It was still entertained. I checked out a little bit in the middle, but it is what it is. I think I'd go back and watch this again. Now that I finished this one, I can go back and watch the sequel, which I didn't know was a sequel, and I'd already seen, which is War of the Gargantuas, which is a little bit crazier, a little bit goofier, but Frankenstein Conquers the World. Give it a B-. Hopefully it won't be too long until we get back to Kaiju Land, Monster Island, whatever you want to call it. Back to that territory of wonderful giant monster movies. One of my favorite genres. And like I said, this one was a pretty good average representation of that. And I'm looking forward to some more. So until the next movie review, stay safe out there, be good to yourselves, and have a good day, everybody.